As many of you know, I'm not an American, so with as much as I think I know what's going on in the States, I'll sometimes hear things that will surprise me. I was recently having a conversation with a American philosophy professor about the state of intellectual life, but also especially religion and faith where he lives, and he said that he's noticing a huge spike in fascination and experimentation with the occult. And even among people who think of themselves or who identify themselves as Christians. And as one anecdotal example, he pointed me to a YouTube channel that he feels exemplified this phenomenon. And I'm not going to share the name or link to it from here for reasons that I'll explain in a second, but just by way of an introduction, the basic claim made by the presenter on his channel is that he used to be a Christian pastor, and according to him, he was highly sought after in that role, until a series of experiences led him to become fascinated with Satan as an actual spiritual person, which eventually led to his becoming an all-encompassing devotion for which he has now dedicated his life. And the reason I'm not going to share the name or link to his channel is because I think this kind of thing can create an unhealthy or even morbid fascination that can build into a temptation to want to look or listen, not because this person has wisdom or knowledge to share, but for the same reason people might tune in to hear an interview with someone who has been sentenced to death and is now anticipating their execution. It's a curiosity to hear a condemned man speak, to try to understand his state of mind and what it is that he grasps at, to avoid surrendering to just utter despair. But it's so uncanny and disturbing that you can't help but feel contaminated by it if you spend enough time exposed to it. So to spare you from that, I won't share his name or his channel, but I am going to relay some details from his, testimony, explanation for why he has embraced this conversion of heart and mind, in order to underscore what I think is the absolute reckless and irrational motivations for his actions, and whatever it is that might draw others into this same trap. So he tells the story of having been a Christian pastor who at some point starts having these spiritual encounters in which he is removed from his body and taken to some ethereal desert plain or environment in which a dark, hooded, but kind of radiant figure confronts him and identifies himself in cryptic terms. But to anyone who's biblically literate, it's obvious that this person or this being is identifying themselves as Lucifer. He then offers him this chalice to drink from as some kind of initiation into his fold and alliance. The presenter claims that he refused the cup that was offered, but after several such encounters night after night, he eventually relents and takes the cup, and ever since then he claims that he's devoted himself to trying to understand this experience and to fully receive the knowledge and power that is hiding behind those encounters. And I suppose it's not hard to understand why an invitation from an apparently radiant and supernatural spiritual being who is apparently so interested in you that he's willing to spend his time and energy to bring you into his presence, why that would be attractive and even flattering. It's the kind of thing that, our own pride might obscure the more natural instinct to want to critically scrutinize that scenario or why it would happen. Like if a very wealthy, powerful, famous person just phoned you up one day and was like, "Hey, you, I'm inviting you to my birthday party." Wouldn't you pause and just be like, why? Why are you doing that? And assuming that his recollection of these experiences is actually accurate, if when hearing someone tell a story like this from their own experience, you find yourself intrigued and jealous for a similar experience, why not pause and ask yourself what I would consider to be an important fundamental question? Can you think of any example in the natural world in which a being of a higher power condescends down to a being of a lower power to give it some share in its wealth and power? And just for clarity, when I say higher or lower power, I'm using philosophical language to describe creatures with more or less abilities that the others lack, especially when it gives the higher organism some advantage over the lower. So, for example, would you ever spend your time and energy trying to teach a dog how to use a computer to, better organize its day? Or how about trying to initiate a squirrel into the esoteric mysteries of double entry accounting in order to better manage its inventory of nuts? And I hope the answer is no, of course not. And why not? Well, Because for one, they wouldn't understand. They don't have these powers because they are incapable of possessing them. Secondly, because it would be a waste of your time even if you weren't convinced of the first premise. And it hardly needs to be said that we never see other creatures doing this. We don't see animals with more power than others guiding them towards certain goods for their own sake. Lions don't go hunting for food and then give the spoils of their hunts to less capable carnivores simply for their own benefit. In the natural order of beasts and animals, inferior or less capable creatures are either rivals or prey of those with greater powers. Really, human beings are the only animals who take this kind of interest in other species, and in our case, virtually the only time we do so with tolerable intentions is when we want to domesticate them. At best, at the very best, we want them as pets. And even if you don't fully agree with me, because I can already hear people searching the inventory of their memories for times when they're sure they saw an ant give a piece of clover to a ladybug or something like that, can you at least admit that many such exchanges end badly for the lesser creatures who can be dominated by the greater creatures? If you can admit that, then don't you think it would be wise, obviously wise, to pause and ask yourself, why would a supernatural being with more power and knowledge than I have go out of his way to initiate me into some sort of, pedagogical relationship? Would I really be so naive to think, hey, I'm a pretty interesting guy. I can understand why the first angelic creature that God created wants to get to know me. Do you really think he's just out there looking for a friend or maybe some sort of vocational fulfillment? Or is it also very possible and likely that he's looking for a pet, or worse, food? But someone might reply, well, why would God take any interest in us? Doesn't this critique also cut right through the claims of Christianity? And I would reply, no, for the simple reason that God is your creator and not some other creature in the created order, as angels are. God created you for a purpose that only he can communicate. And so it would make sense that he would take some kind of interest in you as someone he intentionally created. But another creature who is of a higher order than you cannot take that kind of interest in you unless it is in the service of God's providence. But apart from that, and I think we can all admit, even Satanists can admit that Lucifer is apart from God's providence, its own interest can only be for an opportunity to dominate you. And honestly, what possible benefit could there be in aligning yourself with Satan? At best, the most you could hope for is a kind of Faustian bargain in which you sell your soul, which is, by the way, an infinitely precious thing, for some temporary fleeting pleasure. On the face of it, that's a really bad exchange rate. And it doesn't provide any solution to the ultimate human problem, which should be obvious to anyone who's asking the deeper questions in life. But if it isn't obvious, let me spell it out for you. The ultimate human problem is the thing we want more than anything, which is permanence. And the thing we fear facing more than anything is our declining vitality and ultimate demise. So if some higher power is going to offer me some kind of metaphysical benefit, it had better be a solution, or at least something approaching a solution to that problem. But all the great occult practitioners like Aleister Crowley, Anton LaVey, and if it isn't too much of a cheap shot to point out, most of the highest ranking members of Hitler's Reich cabinet, they all died. Whatever powers they unlocked did them no good in the end. What ultimate good did this fascination bring to them? Madness, lunacy, social isolation, violence, and unenviable ends. The ultimate human problem wasn't resolved for them, whatever benefits they might have temporarily enjoyed before they were stripped of them. The only hope human beings can have for anything enduring is an eternal life. We're going to suffer the thing we want to avoid more than anything else. Nothing is more certain than that, and yet we can't function without hope. Our frail psychology can't animate our lives without something to hold on to, some hope that beyond that tragic fate, our lives will have some kind of enduring satisfaction. That can only be possible if God exists and if he's offering it to us, which places a pretty strong incentive on us to do everything we can to investigate that possibility in the time we have in this life. And wasting our time with spiritual creatures who are not our friends and not our creators, and who likely are only interacting with you for whatever pleasure or gain they can get from it, is a pretty serious distraction at best. Can I ask you to stick around for one extra minute? Because if you enjoyed that, well, first of all, thanks for watching. But now I could really benefit from your help, which you can do in a couple of ways. You can check out my sponsor, Real Estate for Life, who is a network of pro-family real estate agents that can connect you with one in your area. So if you're looking to buy a home, check them out at realestateforlife.org. And if you can help out directly financially, I tend to trust that most of my regular viewers can afford to drop a $5 tip in my jar once a year. And if they did, I wouldn't have to worry about the financial viability of this effort. So if you do want to support, you can go to brianholdsworth.ca/support, or join me in my locals community to get exclusive content and chances to interact with me and members of the like-minded community at brianholdsworth.locals.com.